Scotland voted for a stronger Scottish Parliament, backed by the strength and security of the United Kingdom. And I want to congratulate the No campaign for that, for showing people that our nations really are better together. I also want to pay tribute to Yes Scotland for a well-fought campaign, and to say to all those who did vote for independence, we hear you.
Yeah, a little bit like Jean Chrétien, I think, because Mr. Cameron, the victory for the Union had nothing to do with you. I don't think you ran much of a campaign at all. People in the No campaign, some of them worked extremely hard and very successfully. But, well, Scotland voted, and while the decision was clear, what happens next? Rupert Myers is a writer for GQ, The Guardian and The Spectator, which I think is pretty impressive. He joins us now from London. So what does happen next? Alex Salmond has resigned. We knew that would happen. But although it was a no vote, a lot of people would say it is no for the time being.
Well, certainly a lot of people on the internet are saying if you were to remove the over 65 bracket who voted fundamentally in favour of the status quo, you have a younger generation who really do prefer the prospect of an independent Scotland. Now, whether they can be persuaded, whether there's any appetite for that in the next 10, 20 years, I'm not so sure. But what happens now, obviously the SNP have to find a new leader. That could well be Nicola Sturgeon, who had a very good, positive and powerful campaign. In the meantime, Westminster have to come together and push forward not just some devolutionary powers for Scotland, but a settlement that the people of England will be happy with as well, because at the moment there is, of course, this great democratic deficit that the people of England don't get as much say on the laws that govern them as people in Scotland do.
Yeah. I mean, it's certainly true that older people and women voted against independence. Of course, though, we've seen this applied in the past to other forms of vote. Younger people don't always remain in that position as they get older in terms of mortgage payments and families and stability. They may well change their opinion.
Absolutely, they can change their opinion. And of course, the party in power in Westminster may have had a big effect on the way that they voted. It may well be that in the future, if there's a Labour government in Westminster, that a lot of those people are going to be much less likely to come out in support of independence.
Yeah. Let's talk about England in all of this, because a lot of English people said, well, hold on a moment. We're not being asked about the Union. We're part of the Union too. And maybe we want some form of devolution. Cameron, although what he said at the beginning about we heard you speak, I think Cameron was incredibly unimpressive through all of this. What's his position? Is he stable and secure?
Cameron seems more secure than any other option, or the only other option that was open to the voters. I'm not sure that he has been particularly insecure. I think he took the sensible step of stepping back from the devolution or the independence campaign, rather, sensing that there were better people to persuade the Scots to stay within the Union, people on the far left, like George Galloway, for instance, and obviously Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling. I mean, Cameron did go up there and in doing so had to acknowledge his unpopularity in Scotland. But so far as leadership of the Conservative Party is concerned, he's there at least until the general election. But at the moment, Labour are on course to de-seat him as the Prime Minister and to replace him with Ed Miliband.
Miliband, of course, is probably the least popular Labour Party leader in Scotland in, what, 20 or 30 years?
Yes, quite deliberately kept away from all of the big key events and debates. It was Alistair Darling, first of all, and then when he kind of messed up the second debate against Salmond, it then became Gordon Brown's task to save the Union. They knew that up in Scotland. So all three Westminster leaders having something of an issue cutting through to the voters of Scotland at the moment. But that's worrying news for Ed Miliband, because these are people who he would be courting the votes of in 2015. And it's worrying news for the Labour Party that it looks like if they do get into power in Westminster next year, it will be them dragging their leader in rather than the other way around.
Yeah. Because of the, 50-odd seats in Scotland, 40 or so are Labour. The Tories have, I think, 1. So the Labour Party, it will do well in Scotland, but I suppose, if anything, they do need a new leader. I just want to talk briefly about England, though, because England is the bulk of Britain. It's the bulk of the Union, and there is a certain form of English nationalism. When I was a child growing up in the UK, or as a teenager, you hardly ever saw the cross at St George. You see it all the time now. Has English nationalism, even in a moderate sense, been resurrected?
It's being resurrected as we speak. Today, Nigel Farage, the leader of the UK Independence Party, came out first thing and said he didn't like Cameron's plans for English powers voted for by English politicians. He thought they weren't going to be successful. He's written to all of the MPs in Scotland asking them to refrain from involving themselves in Westminster business that doesn't concern them. You can see it being a big wedge issue that if Cameron can't find a real solution to very soon, Nigel Farage is going to use to undercut Cameron's support in 2015. The SNP's equivalent in England at the moment would seem to be UKIP, obviously the other side of the political spectrum, but appealing to the same disenfranchised working class voters on nationalist grounds.
Let's talk about that class issue for a moment, because it seemed to me that what happened in Scotland was the middle class, which I mean, it's a very broad term, but the middle class was activated. Middle class Scotland came out in very large numbers to vote for the Union. Was this really in any way a class divide or a class conflict in Scotland?
Well, you look at the places that voted, and the very few places that voted for independence, they tended to be the slightly less well-off working class areas. The pollsters have had a hard time tracking precisely who supported the No campaign, because this sudden 10% jump was something of an unexpected boost for the No campaign. Yeah. And it's going to be hard to try and work out where that came from. A lot of people may be embarrassed to admit they were going to vote no because it seemed like such a patriotic issue to vote yes. But certainly I think the working class in Scotland frustrated that other people wouldn't vote with them for independence today.
And the SNP itself, it's a strange party because its foundations were in some ways quite sinister, very right-wing. And then I remember a time when it was really the Protestant party in Glasgow, when the Labour Party was considered the Catholic party and so on. Now it's become very much a socialist party, I suppose. Will that continue?
I don't see that changing, given that their base support now is in a young generation that's been very much brought up on the SNP that we've come to know. Certainly, there hasn't been any suggestion that it will depart from its course. It's looking and has campaigned vigorously throughout this independence debate alongside people like Tommy Sheridan. It's looking to court the very left because it sees that that's where the future of Scotland is.
Yeah. Yeah. And for those watching who don't know Tommy Sheridan, very much on the left of the Labour Party with a checkered past, I suppose. But it's a fascinating story. And you know what else is interesting, Rupert, is that the Scottish diaspora, and we have quite a vast one in Canada, they really are so far apart from contemporary Scotland. And even those who are more nationalistic, it's a more conservative form of nationalism. The new nationalism in Scotland is very much of the left, and I think it's potentially Republican in probably both senses of the word. This story is far from over. A great pleasure. Thank you so very much indeed.